In his darkest days, at the outbreak of World War I and the outburst of nationalism among Western European workers' parties, Lenin plunged into deep study of Hegel's science of logic. In the wells of the Bern Library, in exile, in Switzerland, Lenin took copious notes and wrote comments on Hegel's work that filled up his philosophical notebooks of 1914, 1915. As Kevin Anderson has shown, this time of study would shape his political vision, his writings, and his praxis in 1917, especially on the state, on revolution, and on imperialism. Now, Lenin was not alone in returning to Hegel at a deep moment of crisis. C.L.R. James similarly burrowed into Hegel's logic in 1948, at a time of disenchantment with the U.S. workers' movement, forming a separate tendency within the left, alongside Raya Dostoyevskaya and Grace Lee Boggs, to rethink the foundations of solidarity. Remarkably, since the 19th century to the present, many of the greatest thinkers of political praxis developed their philosophical positions and their political practices in a dialectical confrontation with the systematic thought of Hegel. At practically every stage of Marx's writings, for instance, Marx found inspiration in a different dimension of Hegel's work. In the economic and philosophical manuscripts of 1844, the Paris manuscripts, Marx returned to Hegel's phenomenology of spirit. In the Grundrisse, in 1857, he drew on Hegel's science of logic. And of course, Marx's 1843 manuscripts were dedicated to a critique of Hegel's philosophy of right. Following Alexandre Kojeve's famous lectures on Hegel's phenomenology, Jean-Paul Sartre would draw extensively on the master-slave dialectic to develop his own brand of existential philosophy, to reconcile it with his later Marxist politics, and to motivate his activism with regard to the war in Algeria and with regard to popular uprisings more generally. Frantz Fanon confronted Hegel's master-slave dialectic directly in his book Black Skin, White Masks in 1852. Herbert Marcuse began his intellectual journey with Hegel in Reason and Revolution. Even before that, in his book, Hegel's Ontology and the Theory of Historicity in 1932. Foucault wrote his master's thesis on Hegel's concept of experience and used that to develop a materialist theory of experience. Althusser as well wrote his master's thesis on Hegel, and Jacques Martin. Judith Butler wrote her dissertation on the genesis of the desiring subject, tracing it back to Hegel's phenomenology of spirit and its influence on Kojève, Hippolyte, Sartre, Lacan, Deleuze, and Foucault. And in each of these cases, the confrontation with Hegel led them to their political practice, to new insights, new political theories, and new practices. Now, drawing on this long history, the public seminar this year for 2025-2026 is going to be called Inversions of Hegel 1313, or Hegel 1313 for short. And it's going to explore the myriad ways in which critical thinkers from the 19th century to the present have confronted Hegel's thought and in the process invented new radical visions and programs of solidarity, cooperation, and emancipation. This is an urgent task today as we face a growing far-right movement in global politics, as we figure out new ways to counter the increasingly systematized theories of the extreme right, as we propose new horizons for the future. Hegel 1313 will be a multi-year project that explores the historical confrontations with Hegel's thought from the 19th century to the present, with the aim of developing new critical perspectives and practices for today's times of crisis. The ambition of this multi-year project is to serve as a catalyst to produce new forms of critique and praxis to address the present political conjuncture. Now, this is by no means a return to Hegel in the sense in which Althusser presciently warned us and presciently critiqued post-war French philosophy for siding with Hegel against Marx. That essay by Althusser from 1950, The Return to Hegel, is brilliant and shall serve as a starting point for us. Our project is to see how Hegel has been used and abused in order for us to develop our own critical praxis. These times of crisis call for nothing less. From early on, with Ludwig Feuerbach and the young Hegelians, to Alexandre Kojève in the 1930s and his influence on post-war French philosophy, but also his influence on Alan Bloom, Francis Fukuyama, and the American conservative movements and thought, all the way to the Johnson Forrest tendency within the US workers' movement in the 1940s and 50s, the contradictions in Hegel's thought have given birth to some of the most important and impactful political ideas and practices. It is time then, once again, to return to Hegel, not so much to think with him, but rather, as it has often been so much more productive, to think against him and beyond him. It is time for another round of agonistic confrontations with Hegel's writings, with the phenomenology of spirit from 1807, from the science of logic, 1812, 1816, from the encyclopedia, both its logic and its philosophy of mind, from 1817, and of course with the principles of the philosophy of law from 1820, what we call the philosophy of right. This multi-year project in versions of Hegel 1313 will begin during the academic year, now 2025-2026, with preparatory sessions. We'll have informal conversations, small seminars, reading groups, and lectures that will lay the groundwork for a 1313 public seminar series on the confrontations with Hegel's writings that have shaped world history. Throughout, the ambition will be to develop a new critical praxis for today. Welcome to Hegel 1313, and please join me in this enterprise. Thanks.